Okay, picture this. You're in Hawaii. But right now, I need you to completely erase that postcard-perfect image of the sunny beaches, the beautiful sunsets, and the luxury resorts from your mind. Just strip all of that away for a second, because beneath those paved roads and towering high-rises lies what is arguably one of the most spiritually charged places on Earth. Today, in this explainer, we are diving deep into a chilling phenomenon known as the Hakai Pō, or the Night Marchers. These are ancient, invisible paths that simply do not belong to the living. And if you ever happen to find yourself crossing one of these centuries-old trails after dark, well, the stakes of your very next move are quite literally life and death.
So there's this rule in Hawaii. It's passed down through generations of families, and it's something you learn by the time you're old enough to be playing outside after dark. There are two absolutely terrifying components to surviving an encounter. First, if you hear the sounds of the march approaching, you have to step off the path immediately. Drop straight to the ground face down, and whatever you do, never look up. But honestly, it's the second part of this rule that always sends a shiver down my spine. If you're lying there in the dark and you hear a voice calling your name, specifically the familiar voice of someone you loved who has been dead for years, begging you to come with them, you must never, ever answer. Because the accounts all say the same thing. If you answer, you aren't coming back.
You know what's really wild about this? It's how incredibly consistent the stories are. We're talking about completely different islands, completely different generations, yet people who have literally never met describe the exact same sequence of events. Long before you actually see any torches or hear heavy footsteps, you'll notice a sudden, completely unnatural drop in the wind. The air around you gets super thick and heavy, kind of like that intense pressure right before a massive thunderstorm breaks. And then, the smell hits you. Witnesses always describe this undeniable, overpowering scent of sea salt mixed with profound decay. It's the scent of something impossibly old. And that sensory warning always shows up first, basically letting you know the procession is already terrifyingly close. Section 1. The sacred Kapu system, governing the living. Let's dive right into this. Right, so to really understand why these spirits are marching in the first place and why they are so incredibly dangerous to us, we have to pull back the curtain on pre-contact Hawaii. We have to look at the historical anthropology of the world these marchers actually came from. For centuries before any Western contact, Hawaiian society was built on a fiercely rigid religious and social system called kapu. Now, kapu translates to forbidden, set apart, or untouchable. And listen, this wasn't just a list of polite suggestions. It was a strict, unyielding framework that governed literally every single aspect of daily life. It told you what you could eat, exactly where you were allowed to walk, and even who you were allowed to look at. Breaking a kapu wasn't just a crime, it was an offense against the gods themselves.
And right at the absolute pinnacle of this kapu system were the ali'i. These were the ruling chiefs. But calling them kings or politicians really doesn't do them justice. The ali'i were believed to possess this immense, divine spiritual power called mana, which was passed down directly through their royal bloodlines. Because they carried such a massive, concentrated amount of this mana, their very physical presence was considered highly volatile. They were literally spiritually dangerous to ordinary commoners.
To put that into perspective, just look at the stakes of everyday life under this system. If a commoner's shadow, just their shadow, accidentally fell across the body of a high-ranking chief, the punishment was execution. No trial, just execution. If you accidentally looked directly into the eyes of certain ali'i, immediate, severe punishment. It was a matter of spiritual contamination. So to protect the commoners from accidentally getting themselves killed, and to keep the chief's mana perfectly pure, these highly sacred ali'i would usually travel between their temples and islands in the dead of night.
Section 2. Origins of the Marchers. The Eternal Procession.
So, this brings us directly to the spiritual origins of the Night Marchers. When these sacred chiefs moved through the islands at night, they weren't exactly tiptoeing around quietly. They traveled in massive, terrifyingly loud royal processions. And those ancient historical marches? They are the direct origin of the spiritual phenomenon people still experience today. Imagine being a commoner a few hundred years ago. First, you get that smell of salt and decay. Next, you feel it in your chest, the deep, rhythmic pounding of the pahahu, these massive war drums whose sound echoes across entire valleys. Then, looking through the trees, you see torches burning with this steady orange light that people say is just way too bright to be normal fire. And finally, you hear it. A single, low, haunting note from a conch shell sounding for miles. You know exactly what's coming. Hundreds of elite, fierce warriors and torchbearers protecting their sacred chief. What do? You drop to the ground. You close your eyes. That was the rule to survive in life.
But here is where the timeline gets incredibly fascinating. Right around 1819, shortly after Kamehameha the Great died, the entire kapu system completely collapsed. The old sacred laws were publicly broken, the temples were dismantled, and the old gods were officially set aside. And yet, according to native Hawaiian oral tradition, while the living may have stopped the processions, the dead warriors absolutely did not. Their secret duty didn't just end because their physical bodies died. They kept walking those ancient trails, still fiercely protecting the chiefs buried in those sacred valleys. By 1883, Western ethnologists were actually writing down records of these encounters. And, as we're about to see, they haven't stopped. They're marching right up into our modern era.
Section 3. Surviving Modern Urban Spaces. Okay, so think about this for a second. How exactly does an unstoppable ancient spiritual procession navigate the 21st century? Today, Hawaii is totally covered in luxury resorts, multi-lane highways, and dense urban high-rises. What happens when an eternal force meets modern real estate? Well, the answer is shockingly simple. The ancient trails absolutely do not change. The night marchers don't politely detour around a new subdivision, and they definitely don't care about human property lines. The trail is the trail. Whether it's an old dirt path through a taro field or a newly poured concrete parking lot, the spiritual route remains exactly the same as it was hundreds of years ago.
Which brings us to this absolutely wild anecdote from the Pacific World's Oral History Archive. There's this man named Mel who grew up in Kauai, and he shared a story about his grandfather. His grandfather was building this solid, beautiful four-room house, but the local elders warned him that an ancient marcher trail ran directly through the back section of his new property. So what did the grandfather do? He literally tore out the entire back portion of his newly built house, just left it completely open to the outside elements. When Mel asked him why on earth he'd do that, his grandfather just looked at him and said, "If you put anything in their way, they will walk through it." He made sure to leave that spiritual trail 100% unobstructed. And honestly, Grandpa was spot on. One pitch-black night, Mel woke up in that very house. He knew exactly what to listen for because he'd been taught the rules. But it wasn't just the sound of distant drums. As the procession moved through the dark, totally open missing section of his home, heading straight toward the great temple built by Kamehameha, Mel heard something horrifying. He heard the sound of thick metal cracking under extreme heat, layered right over the slow, agonizing sound of heavy, dragging chains. He just hid there, watching these impossibly bright torches pass right through the footprint of his own house. But hey, what if you don't leave a gaping hole in your living room? Let's talk about caretaker Kaneshiro. He was a super practical guy watching over a house built directly over a known trail. Time and time again, Kaneshiro would fall asleep in his own bed, only to wake up outside on the front lawn. He eventually realized what was going on. While lying there at night, he'd feel that signature atmospheric pressure drop. Then, he would literally feel the crushing weight of heavy, evenly spaced footsteps walking straight up his body. The spirits were marching directly through the modern house, stepping right on him and pressing him downward straight through his mattress until he basically phased outside. He wasn't physically hurt, but man, the sheer persistence of these spirits completely ignoring modern obstacles is just deeply, deeply unsettling.
And trust me, it's not just happening to small residential homes either. Take the massive Waikoloa Hilton Resort on the Big Island. During construction, the developers completely ignored the warnings from Hawaiian priests about a marcher trail cutting through the site. Well, they paid for it. They faced such severe, totally inexplicable construction failures, accidents, and equipment breaking down that the corporate engineers finally threw their hands up and surrendered. They actually had to redesign the layout of the entire luxury resort around the trail. If you visit today, you'll see this random, unobstructed cobblestone path cutting right through the property. It goes nowhere, It serves no practical purpose for the guests at all. It was built for one reason only, so the Hilton wouldn't be standing in the way of the ancient warriors.
But maybe the most shocking modern encounter happened quite recently, in 2012, right in the heart of downtown Honolulu. The Davies Pacific Center is this towering glass and steel financial building. But guess what? A trail runs straight through its lobby. Security cameras actually recorded a long column of anomalous movement passing right through the modern lobby late at night, perfectly in tight formation. Tragically, around that exact same time, a night shift cleaner walked into what she described as a column of mist inside the building. She died the very next day. A month later, witnesses reported seeing her spirit walking within the procession, passing right through the solid walls of the financial center. It's a sobering reminder that this isn't just ancient history.
Section 4. An unending spiritual journey.
You see, the Night Marchers aren't just some scary campfire ghost story. They really represent the incredible, unbreakable resilience of Native Hawaiian culture. Before Western contact, the Native Hawaiian population was massive. Estimates range from several hundred thousand to over 800,000 people. But by the early 1900s, look at this number. Due to the absolute devastation of introduced diseases and cultural displacement, fewer than 40,000 Native Hawaiians remained. It was a catastrophic physical disappearance. And yet, even as the temples crumbled, even as the religion was outlawed, even as the population was decimated, the spiritual duty of these warriors literally never faded. They just kept marching. To really grasp the intense emotional weight of these encounters, think about this story from a woman who grew up right where the Kona Village Resort now stands. When she was just a little girl, the terrifying wind and drums descended on her home. Now, because these marchers are often the spirits of deceased neighbors or family members calling out to the living, the elders knew the kids might be tempted to look out the window or answer a familiar voice. So to save her life, they literally tied this little girl to a chair using strips of flour sacks. They warned her, do not move, do not listen, and whatever you hear, don't look. It's not meant for you. They all just sat there in the pitch dark, listening to their dead relatives calling their names from the fog.
The Kapua system is long gone. The great temples are dust. The modern world has paved over paradise with concrete and glass. And yet, the trails remain. The drums still beat in the dark. It really leaves us questioning the absolute permanence of cultural memory, doesn't it? Will these warriors still be walking their sacred paths long after the high-rises crumble, long after everyone who even remembers their names is totally gone? It's a fascinating, humbling testament to an eternal spiritual duty. So remember, if you ever find yourself out in the Hawaiian night air and you catch that sudden scent of sea salt and decay, get low, face down, and whatever you do, don't answer.